quieting down. This is nice. So, welcome to the 2022 Southwest Regional Economic Forecast. I am Mike Moody, the chairman of the board of the Temecula Valley Chamber of Commerce. I hear that this is the biggest economic forecast attendance that we've had in a long time. So that is great. You guys all must be extremely terrified of what's going to happen this year. So before we get started, I just wanted to mention something that I kind of thought of the other day. I went to my grandmother's 90th birthday party on Sunday. And you guys have all seen those banners where they hang up and they tell you what happened in 1932 and what was going on. So the first thing I looked at was all the people, famous people that were born. And they're pretty much all dead. So I didn't have the heart to tell Grandma that. You know, Johnny Cash was on there. But then I was looking at how much things cost. And the house was average house was $6,305 in 1932. It's just crazy to me, you know. So imagine someone buying a house for $7,000 at that time, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, are you nuts?" Right? That's way more than the average price. And how can you afford that? And, then I remember seeing the price of eggs was 15 cents, which I thought that was per egg. I didn't think that was too bad, but it's for a dozen eggs. I think stamps were 3 cents. And what was gas? 35 cents a gallon? No, that can't be right. But anyways, it was pretty funny how things change, right? Everything seems to stay the same, but over time, things definitely change. So I'm looking forward to our speaker today and give us some insight about just all the junk we hear on, well, who knows what insight he's going to give us, right? But to me, I'm kind of curious about, you know, the housing, the inflation, right? Those should probably be some of the big topics, our manufacturing. So without further ado, I would like to do the pledge, if we could. If everyone could please rise. And we're going to face the flag, which is behind me. Please repeat after me. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. You may be seated. All right, we have some sponsors to thank. So I would like to thank all the sponsors who have put this event on, and there's about 1 billion of them, so just wait on for a second here. I'd like to thank our title sponsors, Loma Linda University. Can you give me a little clap if you're alive? There we go. Loma Linda University Medical Center Marietta and Southwest Riverside County Association of Realtors. Our speaker sponsor, Temecula Valley Hospital. Where are you guys at? Welcome. Breakfast sponsors, we got Abbott, Southern California Edison, California State University of San Marcos, Temecula Valley Campus, and Mount San Jacinto College, Temecula Valley Campus. Welcome, breakfast sponsors. Our affiliate sponsors, we got First Choice Center, Riverside County. All right, Riverside County Economic Development. Rancho Water District, there's Rancho Water District. Shout out to my cousin that works there. We got corporate sponsors, Eastern Municipal Water District. Welcome. Stone House Group, I saw those fellas. Welcome. Paradise Chevrolet Cadillac, I saw Becky somewhere, we'll check that out. Welcome. Promenade Temecula. Mall. There you are. 60 Grit Studios. Southwest Healthcare Systems. Mercedes-Benz of Temecula. S&B Insight Commercial Real Estate Advisors. And now we get to our corporate partners. We have City of Temecula. City Club right here. Hi guys. Pechanga Resort and Casino. Welcome. Facility sponsors, Southwest Winery Resort and Spa. If you've never stayed here, you should stay here, it's amazing. Media sponsor, the Valley News. And then I also like to thank the Chairman's Elite and elite group of businesses who continued investment enables the Temecula Valley Chamber of Commerce to continue developing a positive economic environment. Please join me in thanking the Chairman's Elite and President's Circle for outstanding commitment and support of the Chamber. You will see them displayed here on the screens and as well in your brochure there. So without further ado, we've changed things up a little bit. We've always got to hear from the city managers and the mayors and stuff like that with regards to what our surrounding cities are doing. This year we've done a short video presentation from the city managers. If you'd like to re-watch those videos, there's a QR code that you can scan on in the program, and you can pull that up whenever you like. So let's go ahead and start those videos.
Hi, I'm Chuck Washington, Riverside County's 3rd District Supervisor, and I'm excited to share with you about our growing unincorporated communities in Southwest Riverside County. French Valley is currently home to more than 37,000 residents. With more residents on the road, it's critical to keep traffic flowing throughout the community. The final phases of the Clinton Keith Road expansion project will extend Clinton Keith from Leon Road to Winchester Road. At completion, Clinton Keith will provide 6 lanes from the 215 to the 79. The road improvements are on pace to be completed by summer of 2023. Development continues to flourish near the French Valley Airport, including French Valley Airport Center Business Park, which just began the 2nd phase of its well-designed mixed-use industrial units. The 22-acre French Valley Marketplace continues to develop the retail center that already includes grocery outlet, AutoZone, and soon-to-open Chipotle. Additional tenants include Rite Aid, EOS Fitness, McDonald's, and others to be announced soon. Nearby, a 56,000 square foot center was recently approved at Winchester and Willows Road that will bring additional retail to the area. KTM North America, a leading producer of high-performance street and off-road motorcycles, is continuing to construct their $50 million headquarters in French Valley on the west side of the airport. The 20-acre site will house up to 300 employees and provide space that will house research and development and racing facilities. Construction is expected to be complete this year. The stunning French Valley Library opened in August of last year and is now bustling with patrons. The aviation-themed library includes the most modern amenities, including private study rooms, a community meeting room, creative thinking spaces, furniture with plug-in technology, public computers, teen library space, and a children's storytime room. The new library includes over 52,000 materials in the collection. Tourism is a major component of our local economy, and the county is dedicated to supporting regional tourism. We have secured $1.2 million for a 3-year tourism recovery effort that is currently underway. The county is working directly with Visit Temecula Valley on reviving tourism to the level it was prior to the pandemic. These investments in promoting our destination are attracting attention from Hollywood. Although most of the world associates the big screen with Hollywood, filming frequently occurs in the surrounding areas. And in June, the Riverside County Film Commission hosted a Film Fam Tour in Southwest County. The tour promoted filming in the region, providing first-hand experiences with the region's filming assets. Location scouts for Hulu, Netflix, HBO, ESPN, and many others participated in the tour. 2 business improvement districts were created to support tourism and marketing of the region: Temecula Valley Wine and Agricultural Heritage District and the Temecula Wine Country Tourism Marketing District. Several years ago, the Board of Supervisors adopted a vision to develop wine country into a premier destination. Since that time, the region has grown and we are testing the limits of our capacity. To reach the next level, we need to cultivate new infrastructure. We've made progress completing the first of 5 planned roundabouts and working with equestrian groups to improve and expand our trail network. And in December, we approved a financing district to capture rising property tax revenues to fund infrastructure to entice private development. This financing district will benefit from and leverage investments. With the help of federal relief funds, we're delivering 3 new sewer projects, a public investment of more than $20 million. 2 projects in partnership with Eastern Municipal Water District, totaling $19 million, will enable the development of 16 projects that are held up in the approval process due to the lack of sewer service. Completing these 2 projects will spur millions more in private investment. A 3rd sewer project at Lake Skinner will enhance the campground as a recreational amenity that helps draw visitors to our area. And to provide proper welcome to our visitors, we are working to erect a new monument at the gateway of wine country, announcing your arrival to the premier wine destination, Temecula Valley Wine Country. In closing, I'd just like to say how exciting it is for all of the new and innovative things coming to the 3rd District. The future looks really bright for the residents and raising the quality of life for everyone who lives in the 3rd District.
Hello everyone, I am Jason Simpson, the City Manager for the City of Lake Elsinore. It's wonderful to be here with you all. In Lake Elsinore, we're not afraid to show leadership and redefine our city's growth trajectory, community, and the types of services we provide for our residents. As we have all learned over the last few years, adapting to the needs of our current and future residents is of utmost importance. Before we show you what makes the City of Lake Elsinore the ultimate lake destination, where all can live, work, and play, build futures, and fulfill dreams, I wanted to share a few quick updates with you from here at one of my favorite places, Launch Point. Recently, in partnership with the Riverside County Transportation Commission, the Railroad Canyon Road Interchange Improvements Project was completed, improving traffic circulation for thousands of commuters who travel that corridor daily. Additionally, the city just began the I-15 Main Street Interchange Improvements Project, which aims to increase vehicle and pedestrian safety by improving traffic flow from the on and off ramps of I-15 on Main Street for those visiting the city's vibrant downtown area. Last but not least, we are excited to announce that the City Council recently approved a 5-year capital improvement plan totaling $502 million, of which $89 million is programmed for the current fiscal year. Projects include over 37 circulation projects, 13 facilities projects, 7 infrastructure projects, and 19 park projects, including a brand new city hall in our downtown. Now, let's take a look around Lake Elsinore. As you can see from the update, we've been very busy welcoming many new residents, businesses, and traditions to Lake Elsinore, and it doesn't end here. The next several months, stay engaged with us and watch for more announcements from the city as we move forward implementing our Dream Extreme 2040 strategic plan. On behalf of the Lake Elsinore City Council, I'm personally extending a warm welcome to you today to check it out and envision your part in it. The plan can be found on the city's website at www.lake-elsinore.org/Dream Extreme 2040. See you all soon, and remember to dream extreme.
Lit up like a diamond in the dead of night. Now my kingdom's coming, coming. I was born for the throne. Like lightning striking, sparking. There's heat in my bones. There's fire deep in my soul. I'ma rise up like the legends of old. Brighter than gold, brighter than gold. I can feel that fire in me, fire in me, fire. I can feel that fire in me, fire in me, fire. Yeah. Give me that fire. Give me that fire. I'm in the shadow of the valley of the gods in the graves. I'll keep on going, running, running. I'll go till my body breaks. There's fire deep in my soul. I'ma rise up like the legends of old. Brighter than gold, brighter than gold. I can feel that fire in me, fire in me, fire. I can feel that fire in me, fire in me, fire. Yeah. Give me that fire. Give me that fire. Burn on, I'm shining so bright. Lit up like a diamond in the dead of night. There's fire deep in my soul. I'ma rise up like the legends of old. Brighter than gold, brighter than gold. Brighter than gold, brighter than gold. I can feel that fire in me, fire in me, fire. Give me that fire. I can feel that fire in me, fire in me, fire. Give me that fire. Brighter than gold, brighter than gold. Brighter than gold, brighter than gold. Brighter than gold.
In Murrieta, we build community through connection, innovation, and safety. If activities are what you are looking for, Murrieta will keep you busy. From regionally known community parades to events at the city's new outdoor amphitheater, there is always something to do in Murrieta. An award-winning library and the top-ranked school district in the county make Murrieta the place to raise a family. But Murrieta isn't just a place to call home. It's a place to work and shop, too. The thriving businesses support the community's love of activity and desire to shop and dine conveniently. The city's downtown is a hub of unique local businesses. And the downtown market nights bring the community together in a vibrant outdoor space. And as the medical hub of Southwest Riverside County, Murrieta offers professional jobs that support residents and their quality of life. Home to major medical centers such as Kaiser Permanente and Loma Linda University Medical Center, Rancho Springs, and Rady Children's Health Services, Murrieta continues to grow its healthcare landscape with several development and expansion projects on the horizon. The city is also home to the Murrieta Innovation Center, an incubator for life science startups, and a resource center for entrepreneurs and business owners. These high-paying jobs make not only living and working, but thriving in Murrieta a reality. None of these community pillars would be possible without the strong foundation created by Murrieta's very own public safety departments. As the only city in the region with its own police and fire departments, the city of Murrieta has shown its commitment to public safety. This has led to being consistently recognized as one of the safest cities in the state, and recently, Murrieta was highlighted as the third safest city in the nation based on cost of crime per capita. Murrieta PD celebrates its 30th year in 2022, and the community couldn't be more proud. The community will also be celebrating a major milestone for our Murrieta Fire and Rescue. This year marks 75 years of providing excellent service for residents since it began as a volunteer department in April of 1947. Murrieta Fire and Rescue became the first department in Riverside County and only the 18th in the state to be accredited by the Commission on Fire Accreditation International. A new medic truck, water tender, and a state-of-the-art fire station alerting system keep response times low, ensuring resident safety. In Murrieta, responsible and visionary leaders and an engaged community have created the connection so many seek when choosing their home. Whether it's top-ranked schools, public safety, a healthy lifestyle, or close proximity to premier shops and medical services, Murrieta truly is connected by community, and the future looks bright.
Hey Temecula, welcome to City Hall. My name is Aaron Adams and I have the privilege of being the city manager for the city of Temecula. And today I'd like to take you on a tour of our house. A few interesting statistics from this year. Building permit activity is up 33%. Residential units are up 68%, and projects valued at over $100,000 are up 59%. Hey guys,
Hey Aaron.
How's it going, gentlemen?
Good, how you doing?
Hey, doing good? Good
to see you.
Doing good?
Good to see you as well.
What's going on?
We were just talking about some of the projects that are going on in the city of Temecula. 192 new affordable housing units that will be coming online in the next few months. We're also talking about some of the development that's going on, hotels and other unique opportunities at the city.
Wow, that's great. So much going on in Temecula, and it's definitely needed, and we appreciate you guys are doing to help out the community.
And CEO of the Temecula Valley Hospital.
Great to see you,
yeah, it's
Aaron.
great seeing you. So what brings you to City Hall?
Well, as you know, we're getting ready to celebrate our 9-year anniversary here in the city as a beautiful hospital, so we want to expand.
Excellent.
We're looking at a behavioral health hospital, 120 beds, something the community really needs. I think it's going to be so important to expand our services in the area here.
Exciting.
Other area we're looking at is we really want to continue to grow more physicians to bring the area. So our residency program, we need more space for them as well. So here's the plans. What do you think?
I will check them out.
No, like now.
Sign them now. Has pleasure.
care.
All right. Evelyn, Ron, how you doing, gentlemen?
How's it going, Aaron?
Hey, good to see you. Good to see you. So we're here in the Traffic Operations Center. What's going on in Public Works? Tell me what's the latest.
Sure. So next year we've got 2 big projects that are developer funded that are going to be coming in and really help the city out with the infrastructure it needs to support all the people that live here and love being here.
Yeah, speaking of infrastructure, Aaron, as you know, the French Valley Parkway Interchange Phase 2 project is right upon us. In the next couple months, we'll have that out to bid. That's the $130 million project, which makes up a good portion of that $790 million CIP 5-year budget we have.
Wow, $790 million capital budget? That's insane for a city our size. Scott, how you doing?
Aaron, how are you?
Hi, Annette. Hey. Good to see you.
You too.
Welcome to City Hall.
Thanks.
What's going on?
Well, I know it's only August, but we're already planning for Temecula Chill this holiday season.
Hey Aaron, did you see that our visitor spending numbers are almost back to pre-COVID levels? We should be at $850 million in visitor spending this year.
$850 million a year. So impressive. Very well done, Visit Temecula Valley.
Thank you.
Hi, Lean. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Lean is responsible for all the city's social media platforms. So tell me a little bit about what's going on today.
I was just editing a video for a new TikTok account. Did you know that the city of Temecula has the most influential social media presence out of all California cities of our size? You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and now TikTok. Be sure to follow us at City of Temecula.
Fantastic. Keep up the great work. Hey, it's Christine and Tanis from Economic Development. How are things?
There is a flurry of development happening in Temecula. Longhorn Steakhouse just started construction. Burlington Department Stores located on the south end of town is currently under building permits. And there are 4 Mexican food restaurants that just opened, 2 in Old Town and 2 in other parts of the city. And Benihana is coming to the city as well.
Exciting. No shortage of things going on in Temecula. Betsy and Stacy, I know you got something that you need to tell our audience about. What's going on?
Hey, Aaron, I'm so glad to see you because Stacy and I are reviewing applications that we've received already, and feedback is that the decision that City Council made, and the unanimous decision, I might add, to infuse $1.1 million into our community this year and next year, given our strong budget, directly to nonprofits that serve Temecula citizens is coming at the best time ever with inflationary costs now a concern. So
the key though is that they have to serve Temecula residents.
Right, applications are online and nonprofits can request up to $50,000 each.
Wow, so $1.1 million is available in grants this fiscal year.
Yep, due September 12th.
Good to know. Thank you, ladies. And join me, ladies and gentlemen. We got one final stop. So every episode of Cribs requires a visitation of the garage. So here we are in the garage with our fleet maintenance department here. Hey, how's it going?
Not bad. I'm going out right now. I got an alert through the city's mobile app that there was a tree that fell down on a structure. I'm gonna go check it out. You want to come with?
I'd love to join you, and that's a good reminder. Download the city's free app where you can report any and all concerns for the city of Temecula. Have a great day. We'll see you again.
Hey there, welcome to Wildemar. This is our new lobby and our welcome center. Ah, you've heard. Yes, there is a lot going on in Wildemar. Come, let's take a look. Just barely south of City Hall, Inland Valley Medical Center is hard at work on their major expansion project. This $300 million project will not only add additional medical services and patient beds, but it will also add a 7-story tower to its campus, making it one of the tallest buildings in our valley. Along with this expansion comes a need for ancillary support services, and we have already been hard at work talking to property owners and developers about the many opportunities on Clinton Keith Road near the hospital. Medical office, high-end restaurants, hotels, supportive retail are just a few of the things we envision for our Clinton Keith corridor. And speaking of medical office and hotels, our Baxter Village project on the northwest corner of Wildemar Trail and the I-15 is in full swing. The developer has graded the land and is currently working on the necessary road improvements to Wildemar Trail. This project will have an 84,000 square foot outpatient medical office building owned by Kaiser Permanente, as well as a hotel pad. We are working with the developers and high-end hoteliers to best fit the site. We have had quite a bit of interest in it over the past few months. One of our biggest capital investments is the Bundy Canyon Road Widening Project. The first phase of this $7.7 million project began in April 2021 and is nearing completion. Currently, we are securing the final funding for phase 2 of this project. Once complete, it will widen a large portion of Bundy Canyon from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, a separated bike path, traffic signals, turn pockets, all for the better safety and visibility of our residents and visitors. Our residential has been busy as well. Currently, we have approximately 300 single-family residential units under construction and close to 300 multifamily residential units coming online within the next year. There is so much more to talk about with what is going on in Wildemar. Please come by for a visit. I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee or to take you to one of our fine eateries. It is exciting to see all the commercial and residential development currently underway. The phones are ringing daily with more and more opportunity. Oh, one more thing. Regarding Dr. Thornberg's presentation, Wildemar definitely keeping a tab on the pulse of the market. In fact, our 5-year budget planning prepares for a possible dip, or recession as you may. That being said, we believe with our current financial commitments in our community and the diversified opportunities are worthy of your attention. Thank you to our development partners who believe in a prosperous future in Wildemar, because in Wildemar, we are just getting started.
We're just getting started.
We're just getting started.
We are just getting started.
We're just getting started.
We are just getting started.
Cities there, but I thought that was great. As someone who grew up here, it's really cool to, I just have a connection to all these cities. So I just want to say welcome to all of our cities outside Temecula. Welcome Wildemar and Marietta and Lake Elsinore, Riverside County. I think the only one we were missing there was the city of Emmett, right? So anyways, I think on your guys' tables you have question cards. Can you guys hold those up and wave them at us? There we go. We got a few out there. So what we'd like you to do is during your presentation, you start daydreaming or something, just write down some questions that we'll have for our specialist here. And then he'll be able to answer those. The Temecula Valley Chamber staff will collect those, and we'll have him on the spot live answer some of your live questions and see how you can do on the spot. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our guest speaker this morning, Dr. Chris Thornberg, who currently serves as the director of the UC Riverside School of Business for Economic Forecasting and Development, adjunct professor, and founding partner of Beacon Economics, LLC. Thank you, Dr. Chris Thornberg. Welcome.
Got it. Good morning. It is so nice to be back in Temecula and be here with the Chamber. We have a lot to talk about, to say the least. If you've been paying attention to the news lately, your neck probably hurts from the whiplash. Lots of good news locally. I think we can all say our businesses are probably doing pretty well right now, although we appreciate some of the bumps in the road we're hitting. Yet again, you take a look at the national level, you hear the conversations, you hear the discussions about the economy, where things are heading. We've just had 2 quarters of negative growth. Some folks have called that a recession. We're talking about inflation issues, a Federal Reserve that seems all over the map. At one point, they're stomping on the accelerator, and the next they're stomping on the brake. And then, of course, we have all this political turmoil that continues in our nation, and we're going up to yet again another incredibly contentious midterm election. And you have to wrap this all up and say, what is going on? So what I'm going to try to do today and is put this all together in one complete story, try to give some sense of what is happening, where we are heading, and probably along the way, the most important thing is continue to describe what I call the differences between the narratives that drive the political conversations in our world versus the economic realities we confront. The gaps that I've talked about in the past between those narratives and realities continue to be there, and actually in many ways are the most dangerous thing our economy is actually facing. That is to say, our inability to have a real conversation about our economy. So, with that in mind, what have you been hearing over the course of 2022? Again, at the ground level, things are great, right? I mean, you saw those videos. The area down here is busy, hotels are packed, sales at shopping malls continue to be great. We're seeing new investment popping up all over the place. Yeah, you pick up the papers. Housing market just slid into a full-blown correction, we're told. Stocks are now in a bear market. Jamie Dimon's talking about an economic hurricane. The Wall Street Journal, of course, next recession survey, the economists who contributed this, including our center, in the aggregate, saying there's a 30 to 35% recession. And again, we've just seen 2 quarters of negative growth, which again, in the newspaper world, is the definition of recession. What's going on? Well, first, take a step back, okay? Remember, the people who are telling us how terrible things are right now are the same people who told us in the beginning of 2020 that the pandemic was going to cause a depression. And they were the same people in the beginning of 2019 who were predicting a recession then. And by the way, no one was talking about COVID then. Back then it was interest rates and another housing market decline. I mean, like Zandy, 2019, housing's in a correction. 2020, housing, 35% of people are going to stop paying their mortgage. 2022, housing's in a correction. My question is, why does anybody interview Zandy ever? Well, I'll tell you why. It's good headlines. It bleeds, it leads, right? Beware the narrative, people. Beware the narrative. You know, we all need external information to help us plan on a day-to-day basis relative to our own personal circumstances. And have we ever seen a world in which our personal circumstances seem so damn good when the conversation seems so damn bad? I mean, what is going on? What is going on? Now, of course, this is nothing new. It's been going on for a decade. I mean, East Riverside Center, we've been around now for 6-7 years. Obviously, I had a partnership with East Riverside before then. And in that entire time, this has been my one message: beware the narrative. Now, for a long time, I was a little confused about this conversation. It's interesting, a couple of years ago, a book was written by Robert Shiller, Nobel Prize-winning economist, called Narrative Economics. And the entire book's premise is basically that economists cannot ignore the narrative. We like to. In an economic world, we believe people are rational and reasonable. You take the data available to you, and you build on top of that data a reasonable view of what's going on and make your decisions accordingly. Ergo, we can ignore the narrative. By definition, it must be driven by the data. And Robert Shiller points out something quite obvious, which is the history of the globe, the history of business cycles, the rise and falls of economies, all wrapped around a big gap between the narrative and the reality. And we've seen that ourselves. You remember in 1999, the new economy, right? And in 2006, the subprime revolution, right? And it goes on and on and on. We constantly see these divergences. And what I'm starting to appreciate more so now than ever before is my job as a historian at some level is really, as a forecaster, is really more of being a historian. And tracking down history and understanding the difference between the narratives and realities and helping people understand what that means for right now. Let's just take on this basic idea that at the beginning of 2022, we have had 2 quarters of negative growth, which of course, again, a lot of folks say that's a recession. I beg to differ. Now, yes, 2 quarters of negative growth is often reflective of a recession. But that's not what a recession is. Don't confuse the symptoms, if you will, with the disease. The disease called a recession is a period of time when the U.S. economy is underperforming. By which I mean we are not operating at our full capacity, right? There are people who want to work, but they can't find jobs. There are companies that can produce products, they have plenty of capacity, but they can't find buyers. There's something wrong. There's a disequilibrium that's preventing the economy from operating at its full capacity. Yes, declining growth, negative growth is a symptom of that problem, but there are other symptoms as well. For example, you also have to see unused capacity in our economy, high unemployment, low capacity utilization. Did anybody notice the July employment number? Plus 400,000? The unemployment rate now in the United States is 3.5%. Do you know what the unemployment rate is in Riverside County right now? 3.6%. 3.6%. It has never been below 4% in the Inland Empire. It is now 3.6%. Clearly, this is not a recession. This economy is operating at full capacity. Now, that begs the question, of course, if this economy is operating at full capacity and yet output's going down, then the real question we have to ourselves is not, are we in a recession, but why is the economy having trouble keeping up with demand? Why are we losing the capacity to build stuff? Well, that, of course, all goes to the insanity of public policy over the last couple of years. And that, in turn, is all wrapped around the biggest narrative of all, the scared narrative, the narrative that drives so much of our economy today, the narrative of the fragile economy. Now, what do I mean by the narrative of the fragile economy? Well, you know, ever since the Great Recession came to an end, we have been obsessed with discussing just how awful everything is, right? No matter how good the trends over the last decade have been, the conversations have been about how bad everything is. The focus is on inequality, wealth inequality, income inequality. The focus is on creating images of a vast portion of Americans who are living hand to mouth, starving on their feet, and are one paycheck away from financial disaster, despite the fact that all the data suggests that income inequality has been going down, wealth inequality has been going down, and the financial circumstances of the vast majority of American households have never been better than they are right now. But that's not what we've convinced ourselves of. We've convinced ourselves instead that the U.S. economy is constantly on the edge of a complete and utter total existential crisis. Now, right off the bat, that's a bad place to be, right? Remember when Kennedy said, FDR said, the only thing to fear is fear itself? I mean, it's kind of what he's talking about here, right? We're panicking ourselves into doing things that just don't make sense. And we sure saw that in the run-up to the pandemic. Look, the pandemic was a tragic circumstance, there's no doubt about it. We know that millions of people lost their lives as a result of this disease. That's tragic. But something that is tragic isn't necessarily the economic end of days the way these people were talking about. Do you remember these ridiculous predictions of depression? Right? Because of why? Because we got hit by a disease. Yes, it was tragic, but it was not a standard kind of economic driver. It was a completely different kind of economic downturn. One that by definition was inherently short term. Right? Now, no one thought that in DC. And as a result of that, we saw one of the most insane outpourings of public policy ever seen. $5 trillion in quantitative easing, $7 trillion of fiscal stimulus thrown in an economy that, by the way, didn't need anything but probably 10% of that, just to get us through the rough time to allow things to get back to normal. But they did it anyway. And guess what they did? They overheated the economy like crazy. Now, of course, you're seeing the symptoms of that overheating. What are you seeing? Well, rising inflation. Rising interest rates. These, again, are not the death knell of an expansion, folks. These are the symptoms of an overheating economy. So now, of course, the Federal Reserve went from stomping on the gas as hard as possible to suddenly turning around and going, whoops, we overdid it, and they're stomping on the brake. And they're cranking up the federal funds rate, and interest rates are coming up, trying to slow everything down. Well, this is a large, complicated piece of equipment called the U.S. economy. And you don't treat it like a dirt bike, okay? You don't stop on the gas and then stop on the brake and not expect something's gonna get broken. But that's exactly what they're doing. And so they're creating all sorts of turmoil in the short run because of an excessive panic over an issue that didn't really exist. And now they're trying to extract themselves from it, and they can't. We're really in a bad place right now. The economy, candidly, even though we're seeing declining GDP, is still a bit overheated. There's still too much pent-up demand. There's still too much false wealth kicking around our economy for this to be called a recession. But out in front of us are the real consequences of what we've done. If you really want to think about imbalances in the economy today, if you really want to know what needs to worry you, look at the federal debt. 130% of GDP. And by the way, they just threw another package out there, the Inflation Reduction Plan, which is yet again, yes, it has some increased taxes, but more increase in spending. There's still a lot of a win and a prayer in there. That's going to cause the deficit to widen, not shrink, which will give us a little boost in the short run to an economy that needs to be cooling off. Yet again, public policy is completely disconnected from basic economic realities. As for the issues in Russia, I think we're starting to realize that no, yet again, the world isn't going to starve, but we're not going to run out of gasoline. That was nonsensical. It never made any sense. But of course, nevertheless, in this global panic and the problems in the global economy, people continue to put their money into the U.S., which more or less is just preventing the day of reckoning from eventually happening. So we're all panicked about the economy right now, but the economy right now is just fine. The economy right now needs more than anything else, more housing and more people to work. But in the medium term, confronting the issues of ongoing inflation, confronting the issues of this massive deficit, confronting the issues of the political inability for us to accept what's actually going on in our economy today, will eventually come home to roost. And you know, if I had to sum this all up, and I got a lot of data, and we got to talk, of course, about the Route 15 corridor right down here in Temecula, what's happening down here, and I got all sorts of good information on that. But ultimately, the big picture boils down to this. You're going to have a good year, probably 2 years in front of you. There's a lot of momentum, there's a lot of pent-up demand. It's amazing to me, we're talking about how dismal everything is. When everybody I know runs a hotel and restaurant, their only issue right now is can I find enough people to meet the demand that I'm currently seeing. Right? That's it. That's the problem we're facing right now. But with that in mind, there is a problem out there. You know, I feel very much like I did in 2004, when I knew there was a problem, but I wasn't sure when it was going to actually reveal itself. Well, we're still in that place. So the ultimate answer here is very simple. Don't jump into your bunker way too early. Don't get too far from it either. So, with that in mind, it was a B. Pretty obviously, it was a B. Why was it a B? Two major reasons. A, when this pandemic hit the U.S. economy, despite the fact that it was an 11th year of expansion, it was a very common expansion, the Canada economy was in really good shape. It could handle the hit of the pandemic relatively well. The other reason it was a B, it was a different kind of recession. It was a supply shock, not a demand shock. Again, very quickly on that point, a typical recession is a demand shock. The next recession we're going to have is a demand shock. The demand shock, it works like this. Here's the demand shock that created the Great Recession, 2005. I'm rich, let's party. 2008, oh damn, I'm not. Okay? That giant negative wealth effect had a tremendous impact on the U.S. economy because suddenly people had to rebuild for the future, which they didn't realize they had to do in 2006. You have to save more. Because you're saving more, you're not spending as much. Because you're not spending as much, the economy's not growing well. Because the economy's not growing well, your income isn't going up very much, which makes it hard for you to save. And that's what kept the economy struggling for 8 years. 8 years to full recovery at the back end of the Great Recession. That was nasty. This was not that, it was a supply shock. Again, very simple. The difference, 2010, people didn't go to restaurants because you couldn't afford to. In 2020, you didn't go to restaurants because you weren't allowed to. In other words, it was not spending canceled, it was spending transferred. It was either transferred away from services towards goods, or equivalently it was transferred from today in 2020 to tomorrow, 2022. So the money was just going to get redeployed somewhere else in the economy, somewhere else in time, but the spending was going to be there. It was not the end of the world. But they treated it like it was. And they threw a tremendous amount of money into the economy that was just waiting for the pandemic to go away. And as a result of that, the economy came roaring out of it like nobody's business in very odd ways. Right after that, one of the odd ways was how much we were spending on goods relative to everything else. At one point in time, spending on durable goods was 25% above normal. Craziness. And by the way, it's almost still about 8 or 9% above normal. It will probably be even more so above normal, except for the fact that we just can't keep up. Supply chains are still trying to catch up. Take a look at the inventory of cars for sale. I just love this statistic. In 2017, there are 1.2 million cars for sale in the United States, which, by the way, was the same amount for the last 20 years. Somewhere around 2017, 2018, automakers made an odd decision. They said, we don't think we need this many cars anymore on our lots. And they started shrinking the number of cars, and then the pandemic hit, and they must have felt like just absolute geniuses. Until 4 months later, when there were no more cars left to buy. And they went, uh-oh. And today, even now, there's less than 100,000 cars for sale in the entire U.S. It's crazy, right? How many more cars will we have sold had they been available? But it all goes back to that idea just how monstrous underlying demand is. Supply chain, we still have very low inventory ratios. The supply chain disruption index is still struggling. We're still trying to catch up. It's getting better, there's no doubt about it. Now, by the way, in the short run, that surge towards buying goods, particularly buying goods online, has had a huge impact out here in the region. Look at in Riverside money flowing into taxable sales numbers. The budget out here is just flush. In part because people are buying a lot more goods than they normally do, and they're buying them out of warehouses, as opposed to out of brick and mortar stores, which yet again, because this is the home of warehouses, a lot of those taxable sales accrue to Riverside County. And again, things are good. We all have to remember some of this is temporary. Okay, this is not sustainable. The world is going to shift back to normal, which means a little less good spending at some point in time. We all have to remember this is a little bit, shall we say, unusual. As for the service sector itself, it's coming back. Travel's coming back. The biggest problem yet again on airplanes is not a lack of demand, but their inability to get people to the place they need to be when they need to be there with their luggage. But, you know, airports are packed, hotels are packed. I mean, it's crazy out there right now. Hotels are having another great year after 2021. Look at the occupancy rate down here. In 2021, it was 77%. We're about 6 months in now. It's about 71%. A little cooled off this year. But again, we got the whole fall in front of us, which is a better time out here. And RevPAR, of course, is doing much better. Rates are way up. Yet again, the hotel industry is doing fine. The problem in services, yet again, is not a lack of demand, but ultimately a lack of supply. There's supply chain problems in services too. Now, it's different than a box that's sitting on a boat off the port that can't get in here. In this case, the supply chain problems we're talking about is the lack of bodies. You know, prior to the pandemic, if you look at services, hospitality, restaurants, other services, there are about 1.2 million job openings. Today, there are 2.5 million job openings. Yet again, this is our problem in our world today. The problem is we just don't have enough people to deploy. Now, why? We know it's not labor demand. We know there's tons of labor demand. It's funny, we just got the last JOLT reading and it dropped down to about 10.5 million. First time it's been below 11 million in a year. And that's still, by the way, almost 50% higher than it was pre-pandemic. There's a phenomenal number of job openings. And this is an economy with a 3.5% unemployment rate nationally. The problem with labor shortage, of course, are really a long run, short run phenomenon. The long run phenomenon is basic demographics. We've been running out of people for years now. It all boils down to basic demographics. We have this big bend in the data called the boomers. They huge generation, 10 kids per family. They all went out and had one kid. And our population pyramid turned into a population column. And now, of course, boomers are starting to retire. And every time a boomer retires, you have one Gen Y being pulled into the labor force, be kicking and screaming every step of the way. And we have a basic issue. We're just not growing our labor force. It's as simple as that. And it's not getting any better. If you look at the census data, growth in people in their prime working years are forecast out the next 30 or 40 years. Basically, growth is going to continue to be roughly zero for people in their prime working years. We have a phenomenal problem with labor shortages everywhere in the United States. And of course, the pandemic hurried it, not so much because, anything particularly challenging happened from an economic perspective. Rather, the pandemic simply convinced a couple million people who are on the edge of retirement, well, we might as well go ahead and do this now. And they dropped out of the labor force in a way we've never seen before. And study after study after study shows you people, it's not long COVID, no, they're not afraid to work. Yes, they have the skills to work. Some of the people who retire have some of the best skills out there. It's one of the big hits here. The issue here is very simple. They decided to retire, and they were going to eventually. It just happened all at once. And so here we are at the back end of this thing, desperately looking for people to fill all these jobs in our economy. Again, why is our economy not growing right now? In part, we don't have enough inputs, including, of course, the most important input of all, bodies, people, simple as that. And of course, the sectors that are struggling the most are the sectors that tend to pay some of the lower wages, and by the way, also let go of a lot of people at the beginning of this thing. So a combination of food, arts, and recreation, but every part of the economy right now is struggling to get people. Now, there is a basic upside to this. The basic upside, of course, is that when you don't have enough people, well, earnings go up. Now, we've been really worried about income inequality. Well, we should be. We know that about 20% of Americans haven't fallen behind over the last couple of decades. They obviously need to live. We already have a lot of programs for those folks, and a lot of them do a lot of good. But here, of course, we have a market-led solution. They tell me the left-hand side here, that's the average growth of earnings for American workers. And right now, it's about 6.5% to 7% year over year. Now, the Atlanta Fed's been drawing these numbers for about 25, 30 years now. We've never seen anything like this. This is the fastest pace of earnings growth we've ever seen. By the way, earnings growth for low-skilled people is going faster than for high-skilled folks. And people in the bottom quartile of earnings, their earnings are growing faster than everybody else, the other 75%. And to be clear, that has been going on since 2015. Again, the myth of the fragile economy. Yet the reality is something completely different. Since 2015 in the United States, income inequality and wealth inequality have been falling, not rising. Has anybody seen that newspaper story? Anyone? Now, it's not to say that, okay, everything's fine, we can go home now, right? Obviously, wealth inequality is still a long-run problem. We still need to deal with it. We still need to move in the right direction. And by all means, we should be working harder than ever to take low-skilled folks and improve their training, because now more than ever, upskilling will pay off for these families in a very long-run sense. I'm not saying keep your foot off the gas, but let's acknowledge that the trends are going strongly in the right direction. Ergo, we don't need to be in crisis mode. Let's take a step back from crisis mode, okay? We don't need that, right? And you look around here, you know, I did a story in the Wall Street Journal not too long ago. I just hate these stories. Who's ahead? Who's behind? Texas has more jobs than pre-pandemic. California has fewer. Ergo, California is a train wreck, economic mess, and Texas mighty and powerful, right? Stop. You know, one thing, I don't care where you go in this country right now. I don't care where you are. There's one thing you're going to see. Health line signs. Period. There's no difference between here and Texas. We all need bodies. The difference is Texas has been growing its labor force more than we have. Simple as that. If you look at job openings right now in California, we still have 50% more job openings than we did in 2019. And again, as already noted, look at the unemployment rate out here in the Inland Empire. It's now 3.6%. It's never been that low. San Francisco is at 2%. LA, right now, to put that in context, is also below 4%. These numbers are crazy. There is nobody to hire. Now, the story in California, and I've told this over and over again, is a lack of housing. All right, we don't have housing affordability problems. We have housing supply problems. We stopped building housing in a sufficient way, really in the late 90s. That's when NIMBYism started to grab it. The Inland Empire was a bastion of light in an otherwise grim housing shortage place until last cycle, after, of course, the big rise in housing permits out here in the beginning of last decade. It's collapsed, and now we're again not building enough housing really anywhere in Southern California, and the net result of that, of course, is we don't have enough people. Interestingly enough, here in, of course, Southern California, we have something that most of the rest of the United States does not have. Build it and they will come. That doesn't happen in Wisconsin, okay? I'm from Rochester, New York. Build it, they're still not gonna come, okay? So the California, build it, they will come. It's not complicated, right? And you look around the Inland Empire, for example. The Inland Empire has more jobs today than it did pre-pandemic, about 2.7% more. Stockton is 3% more. Sacramento, 1% more. On the other hand, Los Angeles is down 3%. Ventura is down 3.8%. This is a couple months old now, but things haven't changed all that much. The key here, of course, the differences across these economies all boil down to labor force growth. You still have more labor force growth in the Inland Empire, and as a result of that, of course, you're ahead of the coastal regions. But in the end, remember, it's all about housing. Housing supply, no more, no less. The most important statistic is the left-hand side. That's labor force growth. You can see the labor force growth has been continuing very well out here in the Inland Empire, but it's starting to tap out because you're running out of housing, no more, no less. Now, the upside of all this has to do with the fact, of course, that wages are going up very nicely around here. Right now, you take a look at those numbers on the left-hand side, the quarterly wages for Riverside County, substantially higher than they were even a couple of years ago. You can see across on the right-hand side, every sector, very good numbers on the big front. Will someone please take this to Gavin Newsom and company up in Sacramento? Point out that no, the Inland Empire does not need your help. It is not a backwash economy. Rather, it's one of the most successful middle-class economies in the nation, period. It's one of the most successful, solid middle-class economies in the nation, with substantially less income inequality than along the coast, and by the way, earnings growth is keeping up with the nation overall. As for down here in the Route 515 corridor, one of the things we did this time, and to be clear, there's a lot of data in here, I'm not going to have time to discuss this morning, but you're going to have a chance to download these slides, and we did a deep dive on the employment numbers. This takes us through the beginning. It's not, the data's a little lagged here. We only have to go about the first half of 2021. But you can see the hits actually out here weren't nearly as substantial as they were in the overall economy. In the overall U.S. economy, the numbers are relatively decent. Overall wages, again, you can see good solid growth up to the pandemic. During the pandemic, before the pandemic, good sharp rise. Things have only slowed down a bit. Good solid numbers here. I-15 corridor overall. Payroll rates getting close to 55,000 in Temecula here. Getting a little closer to Temecula itself. This is just, of course, the bottom tip here of the Route 15 corridor. You can see those average wages now down above 50,000, and overall employment, again, through the first half of last year, unfortunately, again, like a little lagging towards the end, getting almost back to what's pre-pandemic peak after a really good run. But again, labor shortage is the biggest issue on that particular front. If you take a look at some of the notable sectors down here, who's been growing pretty well, healthcare continues to be a growth industry everywhere in the United States, particularly down here in Temecula, very good stuff. Construction continues to be good. Professional had a big surge, but it's leveling off just a little bit. Where some of the problems are out here right now, well, of course, government jobs. I know that sounds odd, but schools are desperate for people right now. We don't appreciate how the public sector in particular has been hit by these labor shortage problems in ways that you're not seeing elsewhere. And these are critical jobs. Education is a critical industry, and they need people, and it's something we need to think about when we're making decisions about how to compensate teachers and all that kind of stuff. We got to focus on getting enough people into those classrooms to make sure kids are getting a good education. But as for leisure and hospitality, again, what we know there is that these jobs are simply not being filled. The availability is there, but we just don't have the people to actually put things there. This is the data I can't possibly discuss. I'm going to let you peruse this. This is really great information. Doing a deep dive into the I-15 corridor, overall jobs, stats percent, and then of course breaking it down into Temecula. I'm going to let you peruse this on your own time. Good information. But again, what you see is an economy moving forward strongly. Big construction down here going on right now. Obviously, tourism doing very well. And some of the secondary industries, including professional services, doing great. So good stuff happening here. Now, when you start thinking about, of course, labor shortages, economic development from here on out really boils down to one thing only: how do I grow my labor force? Well, here, by the way, in the I-15 corridor region, you have an option. It's called building housing. It just slowed down a lot. But from an overall perspective, I want to think about the state of the region. And again, you want to think about labor force growth. Well, let's think a little bit broadly, because housing will help, there's no doubt about it. That's basically expanding your labor market on the extensive margin. That is to say, simply grow our population by having more housing. But there are other things you can do. For example, you can grow your labor force intensively. How do I increase my local participation rates? Well, one of the things we can do, of course, is to get retired people to go work. Yeah, exactly. But there are some things to think about in that particular front, by the way. For example, one of the things to think about is the basic idea that sometimes we have rules that discourage retired people from working, right? And maybe we can relax some of those. We can, of course, think about how we can make labor markets a little more flexible to allow, say, folks who want to work a few extra hours here or there. It's amazing how we constantly attack Uber and Lyft, but really, these are wonderful programs that allow pretty much anybody who wants to work a few hours a day to go out and make 25, 30 bucks an hour, which isn't bad, even if you're retired, right? So, these are the kind of things we can do to promote this. There's another big thing we can do to promote this, which is, by the way, helping women have a higher participation rate in the labor market. In the United States, we have one of the lowest participation rates for females in the entire developed world. Now, again, there's two ways of judging that. First way is that women in the United States are just lazy. I think that's probably false. I just put out there's a hypothesis. There's another hypothesis. We go on the next one real quick. Or it gets ugly. The other hypothesis is that, we're the only major nation that doesn't subsidize childcare. There you go. And obviously that's what we're talking about, right? It's interesting, for pre-K education in particular, we've always known it's really good for the kid, really good for the family. It allows a mom to continue her career. It gives a kid in the lower-income household much better longer educational outcomes. But we've always kind of dodged it because it's expensive and it's a social policy. Well, hang on. Well, yes, it's a social policy, but it's one that actually works, unlike minimum wage, which don't. And by the way, now it's also an economic development policy, because now it's good for the household, for the kid, and for a local business who now has an employee that they wouldn't have otherwise. So again, let's do this now, okay? Stop dithering. They're so busy running around trying to hand people paychecks for paying too much at the pump that they're not taking that money and putting it where it needs to be. And then, of course, last but not least, productivity enhancements. How do we help local businesses engage in labor-saving technologies? Working with mom-and-pop businesses, helping them adapt to modern technology. How do I integrate iPads into my restaurant? How do I, automate certain parts of my business? How can I do more with less? Small businesses in particular need help with that kind of stuff. And yet again, economic development opportunities like there. So there's lots of things we can do to help this situation. Of course, the most important thing is to get more housing out here. Riverside lost some population in 2020. It did bounce back in 2021, but still below 2019. Better numbers, we know people are coming back, but again, housing. Now, there is an upside that we all have to pay attention to, kind of on this front. Because remember, when we talk about people leaving the state, they're not leaving the state because housing unaffordable. They're leaving the state because there's not housing for them, period. But remember, it's really a swirl. And while it's an uncomfortable truth, it's nevertheless one we have to pay attention to, which is that at some level our economy is being upgraded. That is to say, we still have higher income people moving here and lower income families who unfortunately have to move away. So what are the upsides there? We don't like the fact that people have to move away. One of the upsides is, for example, overall incomes are growing at a really solid basis. And if you look out here at the Inland Empire, for example, look at the tremendous growth in households making over $100K per year. Some of this is households doing better, but a lot of it has to do with the influence of people who are moving here. And again, what you see is an economy here that is going higher and higher up the skill chain. It's looking like a different kind of economy now than it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and trend is going to continue. And from some basic semblance of things, what you're doing is seeing better spending in the region just because of that. Now, of course, we have to talk about housing since we're on this topic about housing. Housing market, again, we were told it was going to collapse, and then it took off again, and now it's sagging again, no doubt about it. But it keeps something in mind. For all this zigging and zagging out there, the housing market has been, well, I mean, it's still incredibly tight, right? There's just no doubt about it. I mean, look at housing inventories here. Still 2 days of 2 months of supply in the market, which, by the way, is one of the tightest we've ever seen out here in the Inland Empire. It's even tighter than it was prior to the Great Recession. Median days in the market is still incredibly low. What's going on out here, of course, in the housing market in the U.S. overall, all boils down getting in this combination of short and long run phenomena. The short run phenomenon, long run phenomenon, excuse me, is the fact that about 2015, housing started taking off again. Home ownership rates started to rise, people were back to buying homes, credit conditions improved, things were looking good. What was interesting is we never saw a big surge in building. Typically, home builders get way in front of themselves. When things are good in the economy, for home builders, it's the best thing ever. When things are a little slow in the economy, it's the worst thing ever for home builders, right? Whatever the confidence is in the United States, home builders is usually like 6 times as much. This time around, despite the fact that the economy was doing really well, particularly in the end of the last expansion, home builders never got overly excited the way they typically do, probably because of all those negative headlines. So one of the interesting results here was even though the housing market was recovering, people were buying homes, we weren't building homes. Vacancy rates, even prior to the pandemic, actually started sinking to some of the lowest levels we've ever seen in the United States, which is really unusual. It's really odd. And then we get to the pandemic itself, and of course we move out, we spread out, and lo and behold, vacancy rates are lower than they've ever been. Suddenly, the world turns overnight. Interest rates come down, everybody starts buying like crazy. Housing starts going nuts. 30% increase in prices in just 2 years. 30% increase in prices like we've never seen before. What happened? Well, of course, it all boils down yet again to narrative versus reality. It's still over and over again. You can see this play out. In this particular case, let's think about the narrative of housing prior to the pandemic. The narrative of housing prior to the pandemic was that it was cold. And it's interesting because a couple years ago, I remember 2019 came in and we were talking about housing. And I said, housing's fine, but sales are way down and price growth is slow to almost zero. Yeah, but the fundamentals are fine, but the market doesn't look fine. But why? Again, think about the idea of confidence in people's stories. In 2019, I can't tell you how many people walked up to me and asked me these questions. So, Chris, when are home prices going to fall? Yes. When? And the thing was, the answer was no. It's not. It's not going to happen. Because the fundamentals are fine. But because everybody was waiting for prices to fall, because that's the story they heard in the paper, they're all sitting on the sidelines, not buying, which made the market go cold, which convinced more people prices were going to fall, which made more people sit on the sideline. And this feedback cycle meant that we put the market into a deep freeze. Well, here's my little story. In August 2020, there's a family, and they're sitting there, and they've been thinking for a couple of years about buying a house, and suddenly interest rates are down again, and suddenly they got tons of money in the checking account, and you know, one of the husband looks across to the wife and says, what do you think? Should we go look? You know, I mean, we've been waiting, maybe, you know, we have money, interest rates are low, we'll just go look. All right, great, I saw it open around the corner, why don't we do that? Okay, so they put on their masks, they walk around the corner to see the open house, and what do they see in front of the open house? A line of 873 couples with exactly that idea and exactly that. And all hell broke loose. And we went from famine to feast, from cold to red hot overnight, everything exploded. And we're still there. Now, are there signs of frost? Does this market look rough? No, it doesn't. In fact, you know, there's a few signs right now that the excessive overheating of the economy has created some turmoil. For example, the PU ratio is up a little bit. Housing units per capita, that's up. That suggests some flipping behavior. But it's just happening now. And to be clear, I'm sure the graph is out of order, but I'm just going to tell you what I said, right? I was going to say before. And I want to go back to this right here. And one of the other interesting things about this, of course, is this is in California this time. Every time you see a hot housing market, everybody in the Inland Empire starts to tremble for obvious reasons. The last 2 times we had hot housing markets, the Inland Empire was ground zero and all broke loose. We saw that in the early 90s. We saw that, of course, in the early part of last decade at the back end of the Great Recession. But this time around, it's not actually California, it's not the Inland Empire. The entire country is seeing this phenomenon. It is not a local situation, it's a national situation. And again, the entire nation is short of housing, as the case may be. Now, all of a sudden, of course, you look at housing permits out here in the Inland Empire, again, good Southern Riverside on the single-family side, but suddenly, everything is cooling off. Now, of course, interest rates are weighing the market, and for 30-year fixed-rate mortgages are floating around between 5 and 6% now, which is still not high, but nevertheless, suddenly game over, everybody's screaming into the world. So is the housing market on the verge of a collapse, where everybody's saying, no, yet again, no, it's not by any stretch of the imagination. For one simple reason, there's too much money in the market. You know, even in 2019, people were asking when home prices are going to fall. It's a very simple thing here, okay? Housing markets only collapse when there is a perfect storm, right? It's as simple as that. You got to have everything going wrong. You got to have too much supply, too much debt. You have to have people who bought homes they couldn't really afford. None of those things are in play right now. None of those things, right? It's as simple as that. And probably the most important thing is equity. In 2013, 14, we were just coming out of the worst of the ravages of the Great Recession. The U.S. economy had, in real terms, about $10 trillion in housing equity. $10 trillion. Today, $29 trillion of household equity. $29 trillion. Vastly more than ever before. That is armor plated on this housing market. Okay, we have that much cash flow around. Simple as that. It's a massive pool of reserves that will keep things nice and steady. So no, the housing market isn't going to go in a correction. Simple as that. As for out here in terms of rental markets, again, you got to pay attention to that. Cost of rent suddenly went through the roof. Vacancy rates are going down. Of course, there are a lot of folks yet again getting worried about this. But can I point something out? You know, it's interesting, when rents go up, the initial inclination is, oh, wow, you know, tenants are really having a problem here. They're really getting screwed. But hold on. Do we really think that the rental market is you know, run by a few people in a smoke-filled room in a basement somewhere? Let's raise those rents down. Yeah, we'll get them. Yeah, let's do it. No. You think about rental markets, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of investors. It's completely market-driven. And when you see rents go through the roof like this, that's a demand phenomenon, not a supply phenomenon. This is reflecting the underlying circumstances of renters, which, by the way, is fantastic, because they have tons of money in the bank, and their wages are going up like never before. So this is what you're seeing in the rental markets. Now, don't get me wrong, we don't want rents to go up, but the way to solve this again is multifamily. And I keep saying over and over again, if you really want to know what's wrong in Riverside, you really want to know what's wrong in Temecula, in the Route 15 corridor, you really want to know what your single biggest problem down here is, you don't have enough multifamily. Yes. Period. You got lots of single family, but multifamily is a critical component of all local housing markets. Vastly critical. If you want people to work in the hotels and the restaurants, you need multifamily. If you want young kids to start their careers out here, you need multifamily. Rent burdens are not the problem. Rent burdens have been falling. That's not the issue. It's again a supply phenomenon. And again, 2021 was a good year, but not a great year, and nothing close to what it was pre-pandemic, that Great Recession. So we need better numbers. Oh, and I got to talk about water just for a second. I don't know how long here, but can I talk about water? We don't have enough. We have a drought. Have you seen the lakes? Have you seen the river, Colorado River, right? Obviously, we have a drought. We have a real problem in our hands. Well, let's go through this. We haven't had enough oil. What happened to the price of oil? Anyone? Okay, we don't have enough labor. What's happening in labor costs? Okay, you work over here. All right. We don't have enough water. What's happening to the price of water? Nothing. Price of water hasn't changed. Hasn't changed for you. By the way, it hasn't changed for the farmers south of you here in Imperial County, who continue to grow vast quantities of hay in the desert. They are. And the story you hear about that is, well, that's okay because we need it for livestock. Whose livestock? Do you know a quarter of our hay crop in California is put on boats and shipped to Japan, Korea, and Saudi Arabia? We're shipping hay that's grown out of incredibly scarce water in a desert to Saudi Arabia. Does anybody else have a problem with that? So I am told I'm not supposed to grow grass in my yard. So why do you have a county full of it in Imperial? Now again, I'm not saying take the water away from the farmers. Let them sell it. That's the weird thing about ag water, people. They have use it or lose it rights. You use your water to grow crops, or you do nothing. You sit in your hands. You can't sell your water. Why not? And why isn't anybody having this conversation with our governor, who keeps telling us he has a big plan and does absolutely nothing? I don't get this. I just don't. But, you know, by the way, I firmly expect to start seeing boxes of cow manure showing up in my office. Anyway, I gotta get going here. We have a lot to talk about when I'm running out of time. Non-res markets are doing just fine. We know that. If you look at non-res permits, it's doing just fine. You take a look down here in the Corona Moreno Valley region. Get good solid numbers really across the board, particularly of course for warehousing, where vacancy rates are now incredible, 3.6%, 3.2% overall for the Inland Empire. Incredible numbers across the board. Clearly, things are doing well. Now, office space, by the way, is not dead. Work from home has become a fixture in our world, but a lot of people are going back to offices. And by the way, managers are yet again picking up new office space, particularly high-end stuff. So don't get too excited about that. I have a worry about industrial, believe it or not. You know, the last couple of years of industrial have been magnificent after a few years where the industry basically got ahead of itself. Look, there's never been a slowdown in the demand for industrial space, but developers were building too much of it, and vacancy rates started to drift up, and then all of a sudden, everything started going back down again. And there is a heating frenzy in the industrial space. But let's acknowledge that, again, there are some long and short-run trends going on here. The long-run trend is, yes, we're buying stuff online, which means we're buying another warehouse space, which means we need more warehouses. Great. The short run is that over the last couple of years, we've been buying a lot of goods, and we're not going to continue to buy goods at that pace in the future as things continue to shake out. So there's got to be some return to normalcy here at some point in time, and almost assuredly, as that starts to happen, a huge new supply of industry is going to come in line, and the industry is yet again going to find itself over supply. So now is the time to take a step back and go, maybe we don't need quite as much industrial space right now. Now, mind you, the Inland Empire is no longer a place that's hot for industrial. Anyway, so it may not matter to have this conversation. Why? Because your unemployment rate is 3.6%. There's no one hunger out there. Interestingly enough, conversations with industrial developers I have had really boils down to this. It's now about labor availability. And so they're looking at places, for example, the Antelope Valley, or even up in the Central Valley, because there is still labor available out here that's not viewed as being available here anymore. So that has been an enormous part of growth of the Inland Empire, but my guess is that's pretty much topping out right now, and growth is going to be shifting to, shall we say, a different set of industries as the economy here moves forward overall. So, all right, so current economic issues. Where is this economy? Where are we heading right now? And of course, understand where a lot of our frustrations lie. At the moment, of course, the big issue has been the increase in inflation, which has cooled off from this last month from about 9.6 down to 8.2%. And everybody's saying, inflation's over. Yeah, right. Then of course we have a bear market, which means the stock market has fallen by 20%. But even here I have a bit of a problem, because can we not all say out loud that when the market goes up 50% and it comes down 20%? That's not a bear market. That's called a semi-return to rationality. Okay, it's not the same thing. So let's be a little honest with what's happening here, as the case may be. And of course, probably what worries me more than anything else is this, which is the University of Michigan Consumer Confidence Survey, which has been plummeting. In fact, the University of Michigan Confidence Survey now is almost as low as it was in the middle of the Great Recession. Now, you gotta always be careful about how do you interpret consumer confidence numbers, right? Because it's not a clean measure of actual, just pure confidence. It reflects a lot of things. It reflects people's underlying dissatisfaction with the politics of the world around us today. It reflects at some level fears that they may be reading about in the papers. It certainly can't possibly reflect people's current circumstances, right? Because think about it. In 2008, unemployment was 10 to 11%, not 3.5%. In 2009, there were 5 people looking for every job opening. Today, there are 2 job openings for every person looking for a job. Back then, earnings were falling, home prices were falling. Today, home prices are going up and earnings are rising at a 30-year high pace. The idea that the confidence today is the same as it was in the Great Recession, when you start to think just how different where we are today is from the Great Recession, and you start to say, wow, there is something really weird going on here. But again, it's not weird in the economy, it's weird in our heads. This is where the problem is. It's our interpretation of what's going on. And the question I have to ask everybody is, why are we so damn angry? Because we are, right? We are. Now, if this situation we're in right now, again, goes back to the basic idea that we vastly overstimulated the economy. For every dollar of lost income, the federal government directly gave households back $2.60. And you just think of that all by itself. For every dollar of lost income, households directly received in subsidies, whether it was PPP, or the subsidy checks that got mailed to your home, or unemployment insurance benefits that went to a family member, or somebody in prison, or somebody who lives in Saudi Arabia, I don't know, whatever. But $2.60 went out for every dollar of lost income. That's nuts, right? This is crazy, but that's what they did. And then, of course, you have Mr. Powell got involved. And Mr. Powell, of course, did exactly what Ben Bernanke did before him. He lowered the federal funds rate to 0, and then he said, well, that's not enough, so I'm going to do quantitative easing. And boy, did he do quantitative easing. You know, Ben Bernanke, again, context is really helpful here. Ben Bernanke, over 6 years, did $3.5 trillion of quantitative easing. This guy did $5 trillion of quantitative easing in 2 years. And by the way, of that $5 trillion, $3 trillion was done over lunch. Really, in 1 week, they did $3 trillion of quantitative easing, as much as Ben Bernanke did in 6 years. And then he followed it up with 2 years more, of $2 trillion more quantitative easing. But again, why? That's the question I keep asking myself. Why did you do $5 trillion of quantitative easing? Because back then, we had a crisis. The bank charge-off rate was 3%. Today, it's basically the lowest it's ever been. Back then, home prices were falling 15% a year, not rising by 20%. Back then, we had record numbers of foreclosures and bankruptcies. Today, we have none. The question you have to ask yourself is, what war was he fighting? What crisis was he combating? We didn't have a financial problem to cure, but he acted as we did. And this, again, goes to the heart of the dangers of a broken narrative. Look, in the 1950s, they separated the Federal Reserve from the Treasury because it was determined that you want to have the Federal Reserve operated not on the basis of political narratives, but on the basis of economic data. So we're going to separate it from political institutions, and we're going to staff it with a bunch of incredibly boring, gray people called monetary economists and bankers. Okay? But that ended about 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it became politicized again. And suddenly, being nominated for the board was not a function of, are you a great human being who understands monetary economics and banking? Now it's, do you fit a particular role? Do you have a particular view? It's now being filled with people who have partisan views rather than substantial economic expertise. And as a result of that, they are running after the political narrative while they ignore the data. And therein lies, of course, all the danger that we're talking about. If you think about what Jerome Powell has done, I can't say it any better right here. Look at M2. This is basic money supply growth, okay? Money supply ultimately drives inflation. Inflation is a monetary phenomenon. We all learned that in grad school. Yet apparently everybody in the Federal Reserve completely forgotten that. Back when Ben Bernanke did $3.5 trillion of quantitative easing, M2 stayed nice and steady. He just offset inflationary pressures. This time, no deflationary pressures, $5 trillion of quantitative easing, and you have the single largest growth of money supply ever seen. Now, if you really want to break this down, this gets a little bit technical, but for those of you, has anybody ever heard of modern monetary theory, MMT? Okay? Modern monetary theory is an insane idea that the government doesn't actually need to ever borrow. Rather, they will tax and spend, and any deficits left over, they will simply monetize. They'll print money to cover. That is an honest-to-God idea being pushed forward by certain elements in the economics community. Well, that's what we just did, people. Because we had $7 trillion of fiscal spending that was covered by $5 trillion of quantitative easing, which bought basically government bonds. We just had our first experiment with MMT, and guess what? It was an utter failure. Because when you pour that much money into the economy, inflation happens. Now, not right away, because this is the danger of inflation. This is what Milton Friedman talked about in his book, Money Mischief, which is a great book. Everybody should pick it up. He said, when you pour money into the economy, there's a short-run and a long-run effect. The short-run effect is money illusion. The short-run effect is all the money comes to the economy and makes us all feel rich. And boy, do we feel rich. Because of all this money they poured into the economy, because of our MMT experiment, over the last 5 years, you've seen $40 trillion in new household net worth being generated in 5 years. We've never seen this much net worth generated in such a short period of time ever before. No wonder everybody's buying cars. No wonder everybody's going on to hotels. No wonder everybody's heading to Vegas and casinos across California and heading overseas to places far afield. We're all rich. We're all rich. And by the way, it's not just the top 1%. You look at the data, actually the bottom 50% have seen their wealth increase by more than the top 1%. Now again, wealth inequality is falling, hasn't fallen enough. But this is everything that's happening. But the real danger here is the illusion of wealth that we don't actually have. That is exactly what happened in the run-up to the Great Recession. We all thought we were much richer than we are. And we are now yet again in the midst of a binging economy. The trade balance is now 5% of GDP. Consumer spending as a percent of GDP is climbing yet again to all-time highs, as we saw in the run-up to the Great Recession. Everybody needs to stop and go, holy cow, we're doing it again. But of course, back then it was driven by subprime cash, driven by the funny money getting funneled through Wall Street. This time it's funny money coming out of the Federal Reserve. So yeah, we have a real problem in our hands. There's no doubt about it. Now, the problem here, of course, is when you have more demand than you have supply, prices go up. That's the old joke, by the way. What is inflation? Inflation is the consequence of too much money chasing too few goods. And that's exactly what we're seeing in our economy today. Inflation across the board going up at various levels. It's not just here, the entire globe is seeing inflation because the European Union overdid it, the UK overdid it, even Japan overdid it a bit. And everybody's seeing inflation at this particular point in time. And of course, this is what's making everybody so angry. The price of the pump, right? If I can see, dollars, I got to see those stupid Biden did this stickers, right? Which make me crazy. Actually, Jerome Powell did it, okay? Because when you think about it, first of all, let's get a little honest about how much inflation we've actually seen. In the last 5 years, we've had 4 years of low inflation, 1 year of bad inflation. Which means over the last 5 years, we've seen about 15% inflation. If you want to see how bad inflation you can get, look where Jimmy Carter was in 1979, when inflation over the previous 5 years was 50%. And as far as people getting ahead of themselves, savings rates are going down to below 5%, but again, only on the back end of a massive accumulation in savings. So people are still way in front of things. Simple as that. And as far as interest rates going up, yes, I appreciate that interest rates are up. Can I put something out? The real interest rate you need to worry about is the interest rate you need to worry about is the real interest rate. Have you heard of that term? It's inflation, it's interest rate minus inflation. So you say, wow, mortgage rates are 5%, that's high. Inflation is 8%. That means the real interest rate on a mortgage debt right now is negative 2%. You see that? What do you think of that? Prices are going up faster than price growth is higher than inflation. Real interest rates are negative. That's not a burden. This isn't the issue. I mean, gasoline got up in prices, starting to go down again. And everybody kept saying, I can hear you about this, right? You see it parsed in the Wall Street Journal. Oh, inflation is because of gasoline and used car and everything else. Stop for a second. Are gasoline prices higher because of demand or supply? There's no doubt supply was part of it. But let's be clear. Gas went from like $4 a gallon to $6 a gallon. Okay, that's a pretty big jump. And if this was just a supply problem, what people do when prices go up is they consume less. Take a look at the right-hand side. That's U.S. vehicle miles driven travel. Does anybody see a decline in vehicle miles driven over the last year? Not a bit. Been flat. When prices of gasoline go up by 50% and people keep driving the same number of miles, that's a demand issue, not a supply one. You see? You know, if we didn't have all the money in the economy and we had a little bit of oil disruption in the Russia-Ukrainian situation, prices would have gone up a little and demand, actual consumption of gas would have gone down. Not this time. Not this time. And of course, you know, Gavin Newsom wants to give everybody even more money. What are we doing? Stop. But they can't, right? They can't help themselves. Once you start handing out the money and you get all the political accolades from it, you don't want to stop. Now, yes, markets are slowing down. Venture capital is slowing down. The stock market came down. But again, the stock market had the second highest P/E ratio. It wasn't sustainable. Are we going to have that much venture capital year after year? Bitcoin, I even checked it. What's Bitcoin at nowadays? Do we know? 23,000. All right, 23,000 more and we'll be back to fundamental value. Again, it's a Ponzi scheme. Why it's amazing this thing is even a thing, right? So what do? Again, the stories. It's supply chain issues. It's a federal deficit. It's green corporations. It's not manufacturing. Buying to bag your energy costs. Mr. Putin's fault. No. What next? Saturn isn't aligned with Jupiter. Disco's making a comeback. Is that who else in jeopardy? No. It's a monetary phenomenon, people. Simple as that. And we keep, even now, you keep getting these stupid forecasts. Oh, 1 month inflation rate slowed down. Yeah, there you go, everything's fine. By next year, inflation will be 1%. No, it won't. It won't. Look, they increased the money supply by 40%. Okay? Holding all else constant, that means 40% inflation, people. Okay? 40% inflation. 40%. We're 8% through it. There's 32% more price increases necessary to re-equilibrate the size of the economy with the size of the money supply. Period. Until you start quantitative tightening, which they still haven't begun. They're still talking about it. They're only raising the federal funds rate. It's doing nothing. You're chasing the long end of the yield curve. It's ridiculous. You have to quantitative tighten. Why won't they? Because of these headlines. Good morning. The government's plan to fight inflation could cost jobs and restrict wage growth. Well, the government's plan to fight inflation must cost jobs and restrict wage growth. That's what it has to do. Because these are the problems that are driving inflation in the first place. But they're afraid of what they're going to have to do to fight inflation, which means they're not going to fight it. which means inflation isn't going anywhere. So inflation is still going to be here. Interest rates are still low and accommodative. The current shifts in the economy you're seeing are completely transitory as the economy jumps from rail to rail, trying to keep up with massive shifts in demand driven by these crazy shifts in public policy. And we haven't gotten to the heart of the matter, which is real interest rates have to go very positive in order to cool this economy off. When that happens, that's when things get ugly. Hasn't happened yet. In the meantime, we're getting more and more under control. Now the thing here, the thing when this becomes really problematic is when you add this all up with 130% debt to GDP our federal government's carrying. Let me put this in context. In the last 20 years, our federal government has borrowed on our behalf $60,000 for every single person in the nation. $60,000 for every person in this room. In the last 5 years, $30,000. $150,000 for this table. $300,000 for this table. 5 years. Do you really think this is sustainable? Does anybody in the federal government even talking about the deficit? Does anybody think the Inflation Reduction Act is going to be revenue neutral? What are we doing? And when real interest rates start becoming positive, what happens? Well, one of the reasons we've gotten away with picking up so much federal debt is because the debt burden of the United States hasn't gone up, because interest rates have been coming down. The federal government has been free riding on falling interest rates the way everybody else has. Well, now they're going nowhere and they're going nowhere but up. And they need to go up a lot more before we actually have to pull off this economy. And that means that debt burden, which is 2.5% of the economy, could become 3.5% of the economy, or 4% of the economy. All by itself, that'll take our current structural deficit of a little over $1.1 trillion a year and turn it into a structural deficit of $1.8 trillion per year, which means we have to borrow more, which means, of course, debt burden is going faster. And this thing starts to spiral out of control. The only way you're going to stop it is by raising taxes sharply and or cutting spending sharply, which no one in DC yet again has the courage to do. So we have a Federal Reserve that's not willing to fight inflation. We have a federal government that's not willing to fight the deficit. Where does this go? Some point in time, their hand's going to get forced, and that's where it's going to get really ugly. Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? Couldn't possibly tell you. And of course, the same thing in our fair state, which is free riding on massive gains coming in from capital gains, which again are coming to an end right now. What should they do with the surplus in the state? Should they spend it on one-time things or spend it on permanent programs? How about not spend it at all and use it to fill in the $50 billion deficit we're going to see in 2 years? So yet again, you start to realize that when you look a little bit past where we are right now, things start to get really grim. So, I have to apologize, we ended on a bad note, but let's go ahead and try to sum things up. And I'm not sure if we're going to have time for a few names, and maybe we will. But when you get right down to it, here is where we are. Here in the Inland Empire, things have never been better, ever. In the Route 15 corridor, in Temecula, things have never been better. Wages are up, critical industries are growing very well. Logistics is keeping up the pace, but job growth is shifting back towards tourism, to professional services. There's a desperate need for government jobs, particularly education out in this region. Infrastructure investments are good, they're needed. Build that Route 15 corridor expansion, get those toll roads coming all the way down here. This place is on fire. The whole horde of Americans in the process of retiring. And guess where they want to move? Here. So, what do you need to do in the next couple of years? Build, build, build. You need to build single family for those retirees, and you need multifamily for the people who are going to work at the restaurants and the retail and the casinos and everything else that keeps this place kicking along, and the wineries that we're on right now. Good things are happening. Ride with it. Build housing. But at the same time, the problem you have, the problem you face, is a problem in Washington, D.C. It's not in California, it's not in Sacramento, it's not in the Illinois, it's not housing. It's federal debt, it's the Federal Reserve, it's the amount of money. Inflation is not going anywhere. It's going to continue to keep up. It's going to continue to batter the markets. Be prepared for a rocky road ahead on that front until the Federal Reserve gets serious. Maybe they won't. Maybe this thing has to burn itself out. Maybe we're going to see 30% more inflation. But of course, in the back end of that, at some point in time, there's going to be a fiscal shock. At some point in time, we're going to have to face the federal crisis. And then, of course, it's going to get very ugly as they battle over what to do. You're going to have to raise taxes, you're going to have to cut spending, and nobody wants to do that. But the most important thing boils down to us, and everybody in this room, and what we need to do to be part of the solution. One of the biggest problems we have is how damn angry people are. Go back to the consumer confidence. How bad is that? A couple days ago, Gary Tobin passed away. Gary Tobin was the head of the LA Chamber of Commerce for a decade. I bring this up for a reason. He was an amazing person. And he was a Chamber of Commerce guy that we saw, because I watched it. We were in an ugly battle over minimum wages in the city of LA, right? And it was Gary Tobin on one side saying, you can't jack up the minimum wage in LA to $18 an hour, which is everywhere else. And on the other side was, of course, County Fed Labor. And they battled. We made our points. Both sides made their points. We walked in the elevator. And I walked to the head of the labor. And Gary Tobin in the elevator. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be uncomfortable. It wasn't. They joked. They laughed. They had a good time. They enjoyed each other. They respected each other. They had debates over issues. They were on different sides. And they walked in the elevator and they laughed. We have to do that. We have to stop being so damn angry. We have to have conversations. You can't constantly draw lines in the sand and scream insults at people when you don't like what they're saying. Listen. Learn. Don't get far from your mother. Thank you very much.
Just go get far from your bunker. I love that. That was probably the most interesting economic and entertaining presentation I've ever been a part of. So thank you so much, Dr. Thornberg. I think we're going to have a few questions. I think the chamber, raise your hand, chamber folk. They're picking up the questions. Yeah, come on back on stage. Sorry. You gotta get to the water, right?
All right.
And let's see what we got. Will we take some of those to start with? All right, let's take the first one, shall we? If we are drawn down only 8% with 32% to go, when did it start to get to 8%? Does tightening QE speed up the process to equilibrium?
All right, let's let me be clear on that. So what I mean is, like if you increase the money supply by 40%, you have to have 40% increase in prices for equilibrium things. Now there's some other factors. You got to worry about the velocity of money. You got to worry about economic growth, other things that play a role in that. But in a very simple way, the question is you've created the potential for 40% inflation. How fast does that 40% inflation actually kick in? Well, Milton Friedman, the god of monetary economics, said long and variable lags. In other words, I don't know, depends. right? We know the pressures that are going to continue. Right now, of course, inflation is slowing down a bit because demand has cooled a bit because interest rates have come up and things are wobbling around and there's some fear in the housing market. And yes, it's cooling things off. And now we're getting a little more oil and that's cooling things off. But to be clear, there's still the money out there. There's still all that household wealth. There's still this excessive demand, which means inflation pressures will continue, maybe 6% per year, 5% per year, until again you get back to that point of equilibrium. Quantitative tightening, the opposite of quantitative easing, is when the Federal Reserve goes out and basically starts selling bonds as opposed to buying them, taking money out of the system and putting money in. When they do that, interest rates are going to go up very sharply, which is what everybody's afraid of. I mean, real interest rates are negative, but nominal ones are going up, and that's enough to upset everybody, which is why the Federal Reserve is panicked about doing what they really need to do. They're all sitting around doing nothing, and they need to be getting in front of this. The longer they wait, the uglier it's going to be in the end of the day, because all the underlying problems that are building up now, like they did for the Great Recession, are going to get worse and worse. Hopefully I made that clear.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
How much has vacation rentals affected housing?
Not much. Look, you know, what's interesting about vacation rentals is we know they're out there, right? Airbnb is certainly very active. But to be clear, the hotels are busy too, right? It hasn't become a complete replacement. We just know there's a lot of demand for people to go out and about. The thing about it, what frustrates me about the Airbnb conversation, people start pointing fingers at those folks. Oh, well, you know, you're the reason we have a housing shortage. No. The fact that you don't build enough housing is why you have a housing shortage. And obviously, if you built enough housing, there'd be plenty of space for people who want to live there as well as for the people who want to have their Airbnbs. Now, I'm not saying the industry should be completely unregulated. Obviously, no one wants to live next to a party house. That's a nightmare. We have to have basic respect for zoning laws and how neighborhoods operate, that kind of stuff. But don't sit here and blame Airbnb for housing shortages. Blame the NIMBYs who are down there screaming at the planning commission, telling them not to build that apartment building because God forbid it will bring in things like children to our neighborhood. Great.
How can we get more affordable housing without hurting the economy?
How can we get more affordable housing without hurting the economy? How can building more affordable housing hurt the economy? But let me just take a step back. The right part of that question I dislike is affordable. If you build more housing, it becomes affordable. You can't build affordable housing. You build housing, it becomes affordable. And the true insanity of that is when you look at quote-unquote affordable housing, it is the most expensive housing they build. And affordable housing, it costs $800,000 or $700,000, where if you go to a private sector contractor who's not forced to use prevailing wages, they can build it for $200,000 or $250,000. How do you build affordable housing? Get the hell out of the way. I like that question.
We'll love this one. How can you tell us about what can you tell us about the rising trend with lazy millennials and their desire to not work? A lot of us are having problems getting your younger generations to stay focused and work hard. It wasn't my question. I'm just reading it.
All right, I got two things. I got three comments on that one. Number one, I'm a Gen Xer, and I'm lazy. I'm really lazy. Okay, so we're all lazy at some level. Get over that. Number two, very simple, is I still remember my favorite quote. It was something like, "Children of today are indolent, disrespectful, and lazy, and I fear for the future of our civilization." That was Aristotle. Not shitting you. That's what Aristotle said. Yet again, we've seen this play out before. Look, the third thing is, and you know, the thing that actually bothers me most about millennials is not so much that they're lazy. I don't think they are. I think they work pretty hard. My issue with millennials is they sit around feeling sorry for themselves. Where they, you know, I had some folks, actually this would be Gen Z, you know, I had some folks walk up to me, maybe mid 26 years old, and they were out of Riverside, I think. And they said, "Look, we're writing a master's thesis, why don't you help us?" I said, "I'd be happy to. What's the topic on?" "Well, we just don't think it's fair. Our generation is never going to have a chance to get housing, and it's just not fair. We should have a chance, like past generations have." And I go, "How old are you guys?" 26. "Okay, I tell you what, I'm going to help you write this report as soon as you tell me at what point in history in the United States a 26-year-old would go out and buy a house." And you tell me when it was easy for a 26-year-old to buy a house. And they went, oh yeah. It's not, it's never been that easy. Homeownership has always been a jump. We all know that. No, this generation is not suffering by any stretch of the imagination. That goes back to the heart of what I was saying right from the get-go. Why do we continue to live with this bizarre story that kids today have a worse standard of living than their parents did? It is nonsensical. The quality of life for your average 25-year-old is so much vastly higher than what I could have possibly have dreamed of when I was 25 years old, when I was living in a 2-bedroom, crappy house in Buffalo, New York, with 3 very smelly men from Western New York. You know, driving my 15-year-old car with no brakes and no treads in a snowstorm. Shut up, people.
What are your ideas about how we solve the labor shortage problem? What role could it make? Housing. But again, you got to fix immigration. We need more housing. We got to fix immigration. We need pre-K education, and you know, candidly, we need to raise retirement age. Yeah. Well, there you go. Yes. Back to running me out of the room. Are we set it on fire? I'll just give this to you. So you can start out anything you like. When are we going to widen the I-15 through Temecula, Marietta?
It's in the process right now. It's actually being planned. I did some work on that.
Okay, the concern is that the Fed isn't taking quantitative tightening seriously enough. How aggressively should the Fed be increasing interest rates?
Well, the problem here is increasing the federal funds rate is not the tool for the job. I mean, everything's on fire because of the $5 trillion in the economy of quantitative easing, not because they push the federal fund rates from 2% to 0. Therefore, raising the federal fund rates from 0 to 3% is not solving the issue. It's got to be quantitative tightening. You're using the wrong tool for the job. They need to be stopped. You know, and again, I'm going to go back to the idea here, okay, that where this economy is right now and how panicked they are about doing things, right? Well, this is what I feel like our economy is. Our economy right now is going downhill, picking up speed, and we're going straight at a giant cement truck that's completely full of cement, right? And they're afraid of hitting the brakes too hard because we may skid. And it's like, people, hit that emergency brake. There is an end point to this, right? That we all have to recognize that we're just not at that point, you know? But we gotta do something. We gotta get off this track. And you gotta stop being afraid of creating issues in the economy. It's too late. You have to pull the emergency brake right now, even if it creates some short-term problems, because if they don't, the longer and medium-term problems are going to be much worse. So the longer they go, the uglier the landing is going to be, and they don't seem to have the courage to do that. So listen, right now we got to get going. Appreciate the questions. A couple quick things. There is some local data that I had to skip over that I know you all want to take a look at. We're going to get this presentation posted with all that information. You'll be able to take a look at that, peruse it in your own time. Please go to our UC Riverside Center for Economic Forecasting and Development website, download the PDF, give me a day on that. We'll also get it out to Temecula Chamber and they can distribute it all to you as well. Please know our center is there. We're here to help you understand what's going on in the world, in the United States. You're right here, of course, in Riverside County and right down here in the I-15 corridor to the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful place known as Temecula. So please, stay in touch. Come see our next big conference in the next few months. And in the meantime, have a fantastic year. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thornberg. That was absolutely amazing. Just a couple things I want to remind you tonight. We do have the all-chamber mixer at MSJC there in Temecula, right in the middle of Temecula. That is tonight. Let's see, what time is that? Anybody know? 3:30. Wow, you get to leave work early. We also have the Women in Business coming up in Pechanga at 8 a.m. on September 8th. We have the VYP Cornhole Tournament with live music, and and I am the Great Cornholio sponsor for that tournament. We have Monte Carlo coming up on September 28th, and I think the rest is in October. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much for coming today. Goodbye.